in outside society, their view on First Nations is really negative. So there needs to be an education process so that they understand why are people the way they are. And when this came about the Truth and Reconciliation, was about our First Nations telling their stories about the residential schools, all the traumas that they've encountered while they were there. There's other things that come in to play, like being removed from home. There's the parenting programs that are designed right now to teach our people about parenting. That wasn't, again, that goes back to the residential schools. Other things that come into play, the loss of culture, identity. A lot of the guys that I work with don't know who they are. They're not proud of who they are. They listen to what's on the medium. So for me, when we talk about all this, it's an opportunity for the communities across Canada to start to learn about why First Nations are the way they are. It's not because that's the way they were. It was because of the systems that we were brought up in. So for me, it's a tremendous tool of making awareness and educating what I call the Kaimus from other places. When I say Kaimus, people from other land, right? So if they can understand that, maybe the First Nations will start to feel better about themselves. We can't take care of those policies that we didn't create. As an example for me, I'm a residential school survivor. And for 8 years, I got sexually abused twice there. After I left the residential school, I carried that, and I couldn't share it with anybody. Who would believe me? Who would I talk to? And you multiply that by 150,000 people in the makeup of our communities. It created other social issues. Secrecy, right? Don't talk.
Don't trust and don't feel.
Yeah. And, those cause problems, right? So for me, creating awareness is a big thing. Mm-hmm. And we use any vehicle that we can to come across. And for this canoe project, that when we sat and Phil and Cindy and I talked about it, we were talking about the tribal journeys and Phil's experience with the tribal journeys. This was an opportunity. Because a lot of the times, in the teaching sector today, in today's society, we're always being told, this is, in our culture, it was really hands-on. There's a lot of fear in the systems that we work in right now. Oh, you got to get a permit, or you got to get a release form to go ahead and do something. So, we're a long way from way I think about when things will be better, right? But at least we're going in that direction now. The canoe is starting to go forward. Before it was just still going in circles because of the systems that we live under. Mm-hmm. Going on the tribal journeys builds pride in our people. They're celebrating who they are. We've gone a step further where the people are starting to learn how to carve. Along with that carving, there's a bunch of teachings. Same as when you're in the canoe. There's a lot of teachings in there. Society doesn't know that. The canoe is our vehicle to survive on this land, to go hunting, fishing, gathering, even go and see our families, right? Visiting. The tribal journeys, even though sometimes it's only 2-3 weeks, back in the day when families went to visit families, It wasn't just for a day. It was 2-3 months, right? It was a planned event. Today, we're so busy with, oh, hi, how are you? Kind of. So it's just pieces, and there's no interaction. So for me, this project, when we sat and talked about it, I said, let's go for it.
Yeah.
And it brought a lot of people in my mind. And it showed what I don't like the term white society, but a better term, that, there was another way why we did it. Our way wasn't bad. It wasn't the devil's work, because that's the way it was deemed. Right. That's why there was a potlatch law, right? To stop us from doing the very ceremonies that we're talking about today.
Yeah, so the reconciliation project that Phil brought to I and John was to talk about bridging relationships and to bring awareness and understanding of the fragmentation we experience as First Nations people and how we have suffered. So within that, I had some healing, only because when you're in a family system, you need to know where you're from. You need to know who your forefathers are and your lineage. And those things our children are suffering today, because we're all living in a small community, but yet we don't know exactly who's our first, second, third, fourth cousin, your aunties, uncles, and your forefathers. So some of those we're able to do a lot of research on, and also in Powell River. Powell River was named after a guy whose name is Israel Powell, and he was the superintendent of Indian Affairs. He's the one that was somewhere else, and he named Powell River. So that was awakening for myself, because I was always curious, like, how did we come about to be called Powell River? And then to take a look at the, our waters, our ancestors traveled, it was a way of life for our people. And like John was mentioning, that's where people went to go hunt, fish, and lived off the land and were together as a community. And by colonization and the history, we were separated. So there's Homoko, Klahus, and Sliammon people. We all share the same language. So with this project, between us, we came up with the word Hehewšɩn, meaning we're moving forward, like forward thinking, and so that our children could understand. Because basically, when you carry knowledge, it's our roles and responsibility to pass that knowledge on to others. So within my education, I had Johnny Louis here as my thesis supervisor from the University of Victoria, along with Dr. Sarah, who was a psychologist. And my work that I had done on my thesis was on trauma, healing methods pertaining to Hla'amin. And everybody I interviewed, which was the survivors and one of their children, all of those people gave me feedback that they wanted to learn the language. They want to learn the songs. They'd like to have a big house. They want to be able to practice, and have pride in themselves as First Nations people. And that's the area that I found the most devastating thing for our people. I grew up with the language. John grew up with the language, and I felt that's a good thing for us. Some people weren't, and it's hard when you're wanting to communicate to somebody. So Phil here, he's learning the language, and he's been closely connected to John, and was also given a name from John's family.
And that name that John and his family gave me is Quinanum, which means one who sees what others don't. And it's the name that I've been carrying since 2012, and with that name comes a lot of responsibility, which I take very seriously. And I've worked with John and Cindy on a number of projects, the Burying the Hatchet, the Welcome Home, and I noticed that a lot of the work was coming from the Indigenous community and not so much from the non-Indigenous community. There's enough non-Indigenous people in this country to change this country for the better, to take that negative attitude that is being instilled in the non-Indigenous people who've been born here about Indigenous peoples. It's a colonial tactic to demonize, dehumanize, and then extract the resources, and that's happened. It's happened here. The residential school is the most obvious impact of it, and that's basically genocide happened here. I personally believe that there's a chance here to change that, and it's going to take generations, at least 7 generations. Where we've started here, we're not going to see the benefit of this project in our lifetimes, but hopefully by our time our great-grandkids come along, things will start to change for them in the non-Indigenous community just as much as the Indigenous community. And Canada's done a very good job of hiding the fact that genocide happened here. And so now that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission has happened and the talking has started, it's extremely painful for non-Indigenous Canadians to understand that their self-image is being destroyed before their very eyes.
That's what I was referring to. You know, the Indian Act wasn't created by us. The residential school wasn't created by us. You know, the reserve system wasn't created by us. We can't change that. You know, the society has to change that. And people have to get educated in order to make that change, right? They just accept the fact that these systems are there, but they don't realize the impacts that it has.
There are colonial systems, and the RCMP, the churches, and the education system that we have today are what was used to inflict this genocide. And hopefully we have the non-Indigenous have the capacity to understand that, dismantle these organizations, and start with a fresh relationship with the Indigenous people. And I think we can do that in this country. That's what I'm hoping.
Years ago, we started talking about suicide. Ooh, it was taboo. You know, today, because of all the work, you know, we're able to talk about it. You know, and I kind of see it in that kind of light. You know, truth and reconciliation, what is that? Well, the more you talk about it, the more educated that we can. When I was talking about the First Nation people have done a lot of healing. They're doing a lot of that through their different, you know, spiritual baths or brushings or whatever. But the non-Native society doesn't see that. There's nothing coming from there. And that's where, when Phil brought this idea and Cindy and I were sitting in the office talking about it, you know, and one of them, we said, yeah, let's go for it. We kind of all looked at each other and we said, we're going for it. You know. So the other thing with this canoe is every year the tribal journeys, it'll become almost like a talking point to continue on with it, right? Well, here comes the canoe. This is the story behind it. It's like what Phil was talking about with his name. You have to announce who you are. My name is Yahum, a man beginning to understand, right? And that was carried on. That was my grandfather's name and his grandfather's. And he had to go and learn at that time when they used to go trade with the people from the interior. So that responsibility of carrying. Now the canoe is going to have that responsibility of sharing this message about what this program was about. You know, making everyone aware of it. Not only the First Nations, but the non-First Nations.
With the Hehewšɩn, we were mentioning to Phil. Phil started a committee, Hehewšɩn committee, and we were saying that if you're gonna do this, you do it the same way as we would do this, which means that you're bringing the teachings forward. And with that, they did the brushing ceremony with cedar and the significance of that. And then when they did the announcement to our community, they announced it and they did a gift giving. So it's an honor system, and if people are feeling honored, they're more welcoming to understand exactly where we're moving towards. And then when the canoe was done, another ceremony took place, and all the elders were given blankets, And the blankets signify caring. It's a gesture. So Phil, and along with the committee, we're learning all that.
John and Cindy were there making sure that we were doing it right. The idea being is that the non-Indigenous people stepping into the culture and learning the teachings and the protocols. And so when we did the first presentation on June the 25th, which was to announce to the community that this is what we were doing, we did it with a gifting and a feast. And then when we did the presentation of the canoe, when it was handed over, we did the same thing. And John and Cindy and Drew at that point were guiding the ceremony along and making sure we were doing it right. But it was the non-Indigenous that did it all. And from what I understand from the feedback that I got was, the first one was like everybody was going, what's happening here? Like, this is not what we're used to. We're used to being the ones doing all the work and not being served and not being honored, and not, so it was a bit disconcerting for the Indigenous community on the first one, but by the second one, they were more comfortable with what we were doing, and what the concept was that we were actually coming in with respect and to learn. And so John and Cindy have been the facilitators and making sure that was done right. And of course, you know, we made mistakes, and we will make more mistakes, I'm sure. But we're moving forward, and we're learning, and we're making mistakes, but we're being corrected in a gentle way.
As an individual from Plum, is that we're fortunate to have that opportunity to heal from some of these experiences where our parents and grandparents didn't have that. There was an invisible line, and all their children were taken away, so they were robbed of the language and their livelihood. So with us, we had the opportunity to bridge, meaning that we learned the non-native way, but we're learning our ways also. So we're stretched between the two cultures. However, in saying that, we've been able to move forward in a good way, because without understanding where we come from, how do we know where we're going? So we need to build a foundation, and the foundation is about recovery and healing and creating your foundation and learning to practice the culture through songs and through language and through building relationships in community. We've got a lot of friends in our community now that we've met all over the place now. And the Hehewšɩn is another, you know, people that we're meeting, and you're received in a respectful manner. And that's what's happening in today's society. It's bridging the relationships. I've seen a lot of people suffer in different communities because of the relationship, a lot of racism. And it's sad to see it, you know, the violation and the mistreatment and that kind of thing. So as we're healing, we're able to help, you know, whoever we come across. You know, we're asking them come in, you know, participate in these gatherings. And people are slowly, you know, it's starting to evolve a lot more. But in saying that, it's almost like treading lightly, because you have to walk softly on people's heart in order to say, you know, come through, like come and sit down, come have something to eat, come share in this. And then bridge those relationships with our non-native population. Prior to contact, from what I understand in Paul River, is that we had 22,000 Tla'amin people here. And that's almost the full Paul River community right now. So we're down to what, 1,000, maybe 1,200 people. So we've got a lot of healing to do with our children, and then asking them to be, you know, proud of who they are as First Nations people. Hold your head up when you're walking, and to be honoring. So yes, it's been a growing process for all of us, I think, when we look around at the whole thing, because I've been in recovery myself for almost 40 years. And so is John, 30 years or something. But recovery meaning abstinence from the use of alcohol and drugs, and moving forward to develop and heal and grow from all those experiences. And a lot of this took place while I was going to university. Because my dad was saying, you have to go to university to learn your lineage? And I felt bad at saying, well, I'm writing down all our forefathers. Can you just write it down for me, you know? And I had to laugh and said, I'm sorry, because he's been telling us ever since my son was a baby. And then he was giving him the name of my great-grandfather. And I hold my great-grandmother's name. So he was telling us all along. But because we had grown up with so much racism, I was closing myself off because it was a way of protecting myself. You know, I didn't bring anything to me that showed I'm Native. I mean, really, long hair, and I didn't wear beads. I don't wear beaded earrings. Just anything that had to do with that, and I wouldn't do that. But today, I'm proud. I have a regalia. I play the, you know, the drum. Yeah, that's like medicine. So yeah, that's all educating the public on what those mean, because when you're holding a drum, you have to be totally free of alcohol and drug use. It's a, you know, honor system. So it's a teaching also in how you carry yourself, and it's the same with our names. You know, when you're given a name, you carry that with honor and be respectful with whoever you come across. And it's a teaching, and those are really good teachings to have because, you know, it helps you, it reminds you every day, you know, where you're from. From what I understand, what's going to happen with both canoes, it'll be a teaching tool for First Nations and non-natives to get together, and it'll be bridging a place of understanding. So we'd be able to share, you know, the impacts that we've had, and for them to understand. Like, it's kind of hard because when we're saying, okay, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Ontario. No, where are you from? And, you know, like their lineage. So what we're working towards is to understand that as First Peoples, our forefathers are from here, and we want that to be honored and to be respected. So tread lightly is what we're asking people to do, because sometimes that doesn't happen. There's always there's a power in the systems and that kind of thing, and sometimes it's abused in a manner that's really disrespectful, and it's hardening on our people. And what we want for our children is for them to feel good about who they are, not to be, you know, suffering in society. But it's a teaching tool, I guess, is what I'm saying, where you're bridging both cultures together. I think it'll be more than just the non-native culture. We have all different nationalities. From what that one dinner we had a guy from China. I don't know where Julie's from, Sweden? Denmark. One from Ireland, and then us First Nations but it was an evening. It was just funny just to sit and listen to everybody share from their location and some of their stories. Yeah, so it's bridging a lot of understanding, because then I got to know people too about where they were from and what was happening with them also. And it's interesting to sit and just share that with other people. And we were brought up, our family was brought up open. That's the way we were brought up, you know, with all different races. But some families weren't brought up that way. They're always like, watch out, you know, they're always protecting themselves and stuff, and which is understandable, you know, from there. So you're going to come across so many different, you have like people saying certain things when they ask me questions. And they'll start asking me some about First Nations and this and that, and I'm going, okay, yes, I understand what you're saying, because it's kind of sad, right? I heard you guys get lots of money. Oh, did you? I got no money, you know?
Have a look at my bank account.
Yeah, just like for education, or, you know, like all these kind of stuff that people think.
In reality, I would say John and Cindy are like my brother and sister. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we've worked together. It's not work. It's not even work. We've been together doing ceremonies in whatever way we could to change the dynamic of this region, to change the negative impact of colonization on the Indigenous people. And one of my first experiences living in Powell River, I happened to be driving through Slam, and there was somebody set up on the side of the road by the old Kalani store, and they were selling T-shirts. It must have been like, I don't know, months after I'd moved here. And I pulled in and bought a T-shirt, and it was a yellow T-shirt, and I'll never forget it. It was a yellow T-shirt with an eagle feather, oops, and it said "Slammin'." That's it. So I bought it. I'd only just moved here, and then I'm in Powell River, and I'm walking across the crosswalk that's no longer there in front of the Bank of Montreal, and there's an older man on the other side, and we start crossing. There's no traffic, there's no other people on the street, and we start crossing, and as he gets to me, as he's passing, he says, "You're taking a chance." And I thought there was a car coming or something, and I'm looking around, and I'm looking, and I'm on the other side of the road now, and I'm looking to see what he was talking about, and then I realized he was talking about wearing a T-shirt that said "Slammin'." That I was taking a chance walking in public wearing a T-shirt that said "Slammin'." That was 25 years ago. And I hadn't experienced that. The last time I experienced that was as an Irishman living in London and England in the 1970s, when the Guildford 4 and the Birmingham 6 and the Maguire 7 and the Winchester 3 were all thrown in jail for the reason that they were Irish, and they spent many years in jail. And that attitude as he did that was before I knew anybody in Slammin'. I didn't know anyone, but that interaction told me exactly the environment that I was living in, and so I didn't like being experienced it when I was in London, and I didn't like the Indigenous people here experiencing it. And so for me, when I met John and Cindy, it sort of just became, we had the same goal, I think, unspoken, to change the dynamics of this peninsula. And for me, I think this canoe can do that. It may take time, but I think we can do it. The Hehewšin group have been officially invited by the Haggis Clint Williams and the nation to help participate in hosting the 2020 Tribal Canoe Journey, which is a huge, huge leap forward in what we're attempting to do. The nation has embraced this concept, this vision, wholeheartedly, and supported it in every way they can. From John and Cindy's time, through providing the grandfather for the canoes, to providing the Sealy Center to do the ceremonies, and on and on. So we're actually having our first meeting on Wednesday at the Child Development Center here in Slammin to discuss how we can actually start the hands-on work of preparing for the 2020 Tribal Canoe Journey.
The carvers, Phil and Julie from Vancouver Island University, got a hold of Joe Martin, who is from
Claquit
Sound. Claquit.
Lives in Tofino.
Mm-hmm. Then you have Ivan Rizipsky and Sherman Palin and Alvin Wilson. Those were the carvers.
And I was supposed to be carving, but I was on the phone more than anything.
They took his picture on the phone.
It was opened to the whole community, and so we had a number of non-Indigenous carvers, children, anybody that wanted to put their energy in there were welcome to do so, and lots of people did. Probably, I would say there was probably a couple of hundred people that did some work on it. Yeah. We had over 1,000 school children.
Yes, all the school district 47 children came by every day to watch or participate and then listen to the stories. So yeah, there was lots of teachings around that.
It's right by Wellington Beach Trail, so the community was going by every day, and then there was always the people that would show up at a certain time of the day when they were out walking their dogs and coming and checking on us and taking photographs. Wellington Beach is sort of central to where we were in Powell River, so that John chose the spot, and it had the impact that we thought it would. Lots and lots of people in this community saw that, and had interaction with the carvers, and I think it changed. I think it changed everybody's life for the positive. I've had nothing but good feedback from it. Mm-hmm. One of the things that the intention of the project was to have it as a people to people, non-Indigenous people to the Indigenous people, not government to government, not institutional. And we managed to accomplish that to a great degree. You know, the foundation of it really would be when the accord was signed by between Schlaman and the city of Paul River about 14 or 15 years ago, when Maynard Harry was the chief of Schlaman and Stuart Alsgaard was the mayor of Paul River. And that was a government to government agreement, which was and I believe still is unique to this country. And so I see that as the foundation for any reconciliation work coming from the non-Indigenous, and it was certainly in the back of my mind when I was formulating this project to acknowledge Maynard and Stuart for the work that they've done. So it's you know, it's a bit building blocks, and so you know, these two canoes are the next step, and you know, now that we're starting the hands-on work of reconciliation from the non-Indigenous side, I think, you know, it can only get better.